Welcome in, and you are sitting courtside with Karli Bell. Joining me this week is a voice. If you're from Minnesota and you love the Minnesota Lynx, you hear her all the time. It is the voice of the Minnesota Lynx in Sloane Martin. Sloane, how are you today?
I'm doing great. I get to travel on the road with the team. So this is a little extended trip in Chicago with back-to-back games. So just enjoying that and all the places I get to see in summertime, which is a little bit different than my work in college basketball, where I'm traveling to college campuses around the Midwest and in the dead of winter. So it's been pretty fun to kind of change it up, go to these large cities, especially when it's beautiful outside.
What, you don't like seeing snow-covered cornfields? It's not something that just...
No, I love snow-covered cornfields. Let's not get that confused, but it just changes things up a little bit. That's all.
Switches things up a little bit. No, that's fair. So obviously we're going to talk Minnesota Lynx, but before we get into that, we're going to talk the rest of the WNBA. And the first thing I always like to ask any guest that I have on here is, just the state of the W right now. We're around the midway point of the season, and I think there are some teams that have shocked a lot of people in how they played. The one for me has been the expansion team in the Golden State Valkyries. I don't think anyone expected an expansion team to actually be above 500 or right around 500, win more than like 5 games, because historically they just don't do well. So Sloane, with everyone that you've watched so far in the first half of the season, what team has really kind of stood out to you or surprised you in their 2025 campaign?
I have 2, and I'm going to steal the Valkyries from you for just a second, because you're right. It is an astronomical surprise, the fact that they're at this point, because to be quite honest, even looking at the roster on paper, you're thinking like, all right, you got some Bulldogs on this roster for sure. Some players who are going to try extremely hard, who want to take advantage and really harness this other chance. You think of Burton and Martin and think, hey, I can really put a stamp on my career with this opportunity. Cecilia Zandalicini is really familiar to Lynx fans. She was there for a couple of years. One of the most beautiful shots in the WNBA. She can score too, but you're wondering, okay, how's this going to work? Who's going to be that number 1 scorer? Hayes being the 6th player of the year. Let's see how this comes together. But to see this team operate and challenge every single team they play, and the first time the Lynx played them, and head coach Cheryl Reeves talked about just how impressed she was that this team, even with a first year and first time head coach and being an expansion team playing together for the first time, the fact that they had an identity that you could see on tape. Then this was early on, and this is kind of early-ish June. And the fact that they play so hard, I thought, oh, okay, those are serious compliments, especially coming from Reeve for, a brand new team, and thinking, okay, that's going to catch you off guard, with how well this team plays, how hard they play too. I also like to point out, because to me, it's one of the funniest facts, that recent viral tweet that's like, share some lore about you. For me, it was that I was coached by Natalie Nakase in AAU. We had max 3 Division III players on this team, including myself. So she has come a very long way, let me tell you that, from her early days in coaching.
Oh my goodness.
That's one of my favorite things. So it's been a kind of a fun full circle thing to see someone from your very quite distant past now, really achieve a really high level in her career. I also want to put the Atlanta Dream in this category too, because Karl Smesko, when you're talking about someone who has spent 20 plus years at one place, and certainly you talk about identity, he had one. I mean, if you look at the Her Hoop Stats era, he was doing the whole 3-point revolution 10 years before it really became what it is in basketball right now. Top 3 in 3-point rate and 3-point attempts per game. And we know what they did at Florida Gulf Coast. But for him to integrate not only the 3-point shooting, but to get the best out of his players, like Alicia Gray has been outstanding. Brianna Jones, frankly, I think should have been an all-star this year with her importance to this team. To play with those 2 bigs, to have her at the 4, I wasn't sure how that was going to work with her sharing the floor with BG. Those are 2 to me that come off the top of my head as really interesting and pleasant surprises for this team, and 2 first-year head coaches in the W.
What's crazy is we had Kareem Copeland on just a few weeks ago, and I asked him the same question. And the one thing that he said about the Atlanta Dream is it's like a fantasy team. The names are great. How are they all going to work together? And then Smesko comes in and just really found a way to blend it. But we got to get back to having Coach Natalie Nakase as an AAU. I need all the tea. I need to know what, first off, I don't want to say age or anything, but like what grade were you in? And like, what was that whole experience like? What was she like as a head coach, you know, in AAU? Because obviously AAU and pro are two totally different sectors and spheres, but there's always something that can carry over that you can see. What are things that you see that you remember of Coach Nakase when you were in AAU to the Coach Nakase that you're seeing now as the head of the Valkyries?
Yeah, so I would have been 16 or 17 at this point, and so this is nearing half my life ago, but so it has been some time. But you look at, I remember how we looked up to her as players because she's has a smaller frame. She's maybe 5'2". I don't know what she was listed at in her career, but she, is like a shorter basketball player, but she was so feisty. She walked on at UCLA, became a starter on that team. And of course, for us, that was the dream to play on that team. I grew up in Los Angeles, and that's where she's from in Southern California too. So to see someone who did that through their hard work was really inspiring to us. I also remember her too as someone who was incredibly tough, who challenged us, who pushed us, certainly got us into the best shape of our young lives for sure. She was very much into that, which is no surprise too that she had, an impact on Kelsey Plum, who's maybe the most well-conditioned athlete in the WNBA, certainly, at her position. So to see that kind of parallel, but I think it was so important for me, and I think for all of us at a young age, to have a woman head coach who was strong and tough and challenged us and did not lower the bar for us. She was constantly trying to push us to be better. So I think that was a really positive impact. So I can see those things carry over where she is demanding a lot. You hear about how hard this team plays. Like I brought up Coach Reese saying that exact words about this team. You hear her in post-game press conferences about how hard we work. I think that's the biggest transferable I see where, okay, that is part of your identity as a coach, is demanding that your team competes the hardest it can every single game. And that's exactly what you see from the Valkyries. That is their identity too. So that's something I can see carry over very much.
I love hearing that, and, as someone who played ball herself, it's crazy, especially in women's basketball. It's really rare to see women's head coaches, like a female head coach. And so to see her really stick to it, go through that whole process, and now it's paying off at the pro level is super great. You talking about conditioning already gave me PTSD.
Same. Thinking about 17s that we did. Never again.
No. I don't know. You can't call them, I think they're called Michigans now, but or champions. Oh, God, I actually am getting chills. No, we're not going to get into it. Okay. No. We're not going to get into it. We're going to get into All-Star now. You kind of mentioned one of the snubs that you think is there, which is Brianna Jones. I think for me, the biggest snub of the All-Star this year was Brittany Sykes. I think Brittany Sykes and what she's been able to do in Washington with a brand new head coach, brand new general manager, and the youngest team in the WNBA, and she's that veteran presence. And, you still have Stephanie Dolson, you have other people down there, but Slim really being, that main go-to person. And we all know what she can do defensively, but offensively, she's just having one of her best seasons. And I've watched her now for a few years. I've always loved how she plays basketball. I think she's just got this grit, tenacity, and they call her Slim for a reason. She's able to slim her body in this way to cut through these really narrow driving lanes and get to the basket. But Brianna Jones is one that I also heard. Why do you feel that Brianna Jones was a snub, or is there somebody else that you would like to discuss and who you think should have had a moment in the All-Star game this year?
Yeah, to start with, Bri Jones real quick. First of all, it's so fun to watch her play. I mean, she still is that true kind of post player, even though she's technically there at the four. Her footwork is just so beautiful. And, I don't shy away from just loving back to the basket traditional post work. That is still something I love very much about basketball. So to see the way she operates and works is just so fun for me to watch. I think her impact on that team from a rebounding perspective, an efficiency perspective, that presence in the paint has been so incredibly important. I mean, she's a 20 and 10, she's a double threat every single night that she's on the floor. And I think that's been particularly important for this new system with the way they want to spread the ball and their identity under Smesko and shooting threes and getting the best out of Alicia Gray for sure. So I think her impact really goes far. And I have to point out too, and I promise I'm not just saying this, it comes from being around this team day in and day out, but I know Coach Reeve has also talked about, I wish we could have had 4 All-Stars. I think there's certainly a case you could have made for Kayla McBride with the way she started the season. Her shooting has slowed down a little bit, but I think that's mostly after the voting too. And then people should definitely talk about Alana Smith and maybe think, hey, her scoring's up and down, but her importance, I don't have to tell you, but her importance to a team that is leading the standings by the number that it is in point differential, that is leading the league in offensive rating and defensive rating. She is the anchor of this team. Now, Coach Reeves said with the way the streak that they've been on right now with 11 games in 20 days, maybe it's okay that they get a little bit of a break for the All-Star break. But that was something that I had to bring up too, just because I think that the top teams, and this goes for Brianna Jones too in the Atlanta Dream, I think that should make an impact too about where your team is in the standings for how many players you get in and getting that kind of reward for that recognition for the wins throughout the first part of the season.
Yeah, it's something that I love the format of the All-Star game. I like that fans do get to have a voice, but I'm really wondering with expansion coming, by 2030, we're going to see 4 new teams. 4? Yeah, math, numbers, hard. So 4 new teams by 2030. And so I want to see there's going to be new rules. There's most likely going to be a new playoff format. There's most likely going to be new things with the All-Star game. And I think I'm intrigued to see what the league has in store. And you don't need to tell me anything about Lance Smith, man. Oh my God, man. She is just a dog. I loved her when she was on the Sky. I'll never forget. And we were texting about it when I was watching her tape. When she was playing overseas, and she was averaging a 40 spot. I was like, oh, where have you been? Yeah. Why aren't you in the W now? This is she's so talented, so physical, and so versatile in how she plays too. She is someone that can truly play up to a 2 through a 5. Honestly, she's got such a really well-rounded skill set, and I think that's a really good point. I think she was snubbed as well from the All-Star game. So I always like to ask questions about awards because we're kind of at that point, who's coming up for this, and I feel like for Rhodey, for Rookie of the Year, is we all kind of know who is going to be. There's obviously arguments for Sonia Citron and Kiki Iriefin and some others as well. But I think the runaway name right now is Paige Beckers, just because of what she's been able to do, which is a conversation.
Actually, Karli, I don't know. Maybe I'm not alone here, but I don't know if it's runaway right now. I'm kind of enjoying the competition. I would definitely put Paige up there. And we all kind of thought coming in that she would be for sure that Rookie of the Year pick. And maybe it's also me, trying to look at it from a wider perspective of hey, what if the Washington Mystics, could they work themselves into a top 5 or 6 team? Could, they get in that playoff conversation? So I think I'm trying to add a little intrigue there. Not that obviously Minnesotans are rooting for Paige, certainly, because she represents our state and has very well for, her entire life and her career. But I don't know, maybe I would be curious if anyone else thinks that there's at least a little intrigue.
You know what? I kind of like that argument, because if Washington, who is a team that at the beginning of the season said they were going to be in a full rebuild and no one really had, it's one of those teams when you don't have high expectations, you can play as hard as you want and play with the level of feistiness and ferocity that you want to play with. And if they're able to push into a playoff spot, and I would say of the two, I feel like Sonia Citron is having a lot more of an impact just because of what she's able to do shooting wise. I think Kiki just had a slower start to the season in adjusting to the league, whereas I feel Sonia's game, I knew when watching her in college that it was going to translate almost immediately. But I do Kiki does obviously have a name in the race. But one conversation that I feel that you can kind of throw, I would say, 4 names into right now is MVP. For me, it's always been Fee. I just feel and I think Fee's just playing with a fire and a ferocity that we've never seen out of her in her WNBA career. For me, and I think you may be able to speak to this more than I do, but it feels like after that loss in the championship last year, she just was like, that's not happening again. And she really hit the ground running, improved her bag even more than it already was. Unbelievable. But I also am going to say this. I feel like Alyssa Thomas and Alicia Gray are also having a huge case for this. And I would have to say Alyssa Thomas right now is kind of the front runner in the MVP race at this point in the season because of just what Phoenix has been able to do. But if you're looking at that MVP race, what is something like, would you agree with that statement? Or do you kind of feel like we need to see how the rest of the season plays out before we can really see who's going to be in like that top 2 conversation is what normally ends up happening like end of August?
Yeah, I think those names are very fair. I think when you are cutting it down to that point, I would put those 3 names in there. Absolutely. So Alicia Gray, and this also to me, just obviously winning and doing well is extremely important in this conversation. So Atlanta, continuing to keep pace with how they started the season, I think is going to be very important as well. But Gray has taken her game to completely new heights with her efficiency, the way that she is able to be productive, especially with her scoring. I always felt like she was too much of an under the radar kind of player because she has so much versatility to her game, her ability to fill the stat sheet, and just maybe got overlooked because she doesn't have the flashiest game. She just kind of does her job. And then you look at the box score afterwards and you're like, whoa, that was a lot that she was able to accomplish in that game. So it's been really cool to see her get more recognition this year, especially when you split it up by conference. Alyssa Thomas certainly is so fantastic. Talk about taking her game to new heights too. I think that's a common thread amongst all of these players. And we know what Alyssa Thomas's game is like. We know what she's capable of, but to be near 10 assists per game, she's shooting at the highest efficiency in her career. She scored her career high against the Minnesota Lynx, 29 points, because of that conundrum she puts every single team in. Do you make her a facilitator? Do you make her a scorer? Well, the Lynx chose to make her a scorer, and she was able to take over that game. And it was kind of a dagger shot late in the game. She had this fadeaway off one leg mid-range where I was like, I don't know if I've seen something like that for her. And I've been watching her since she was in college at Maryland. So that was quite an emphatic play, I thought, right there about how good she is feeling right now, how motivated she is. Something that I say in every single broadcast when I have Alyssa Thomas in the game, obviously with Phoenix this year, is a quote from Cheryl Reeve, who brought her into the Team USA fold. Thomas was really not a part of that ecosystem until Reeve took that higher role because of the respect that she has for Alyssa Thomas. And the thing that she said a couple of years ago that sticks with me, no one plays the game harder than her, smarter than her. And I thought, what a thing to say about a player and the kind of role that she has on this team. So she, to me, absolutely is that number 2. I do think probably more than you, there was a little bit of greater distance. I think AT, the way she's playing right now, the way Phoenix could potentially get hot. And I'm really looking forward to Minnesota and Phoenix meeting up again next week, very much so. But to me, it is still Napheesa Collier because of it's not just, well, she's the leading scorer in the league this year. It is day in and day out. It is 14 20-point games, 9 25-point games. It is her efficiency for sure. And it feels weird for some people to put this in the conversation, but I think her free throw shooting is another way she's taken her game to another level. She just had her 54 consecutive free throw streak stopped against Chicago on July 12th, that she had not missed a free throw since June 3rd. So that was one of the longest in WNBA history. In fact, I think 6th longest consecutive free throw streak in a single season. So to see her to shoot 95%, to say, this is that extra little bit, you talk about the finals loss, this is the extra little bit where I can help my team to get over the hump and be so reliable in that spot. So I think the different ways she is facing defenses, how brutal it is, how everyone focuses on her, how unselfish she continues to be, while also being the best, if not one of the best, certainly defensive players in the WNBA for the best defensive team in the WNBA. That's still what is setting her apart, I would say, by a pretty good distance at this point, but I am certainly willing to listen to AT, I would say for sure, at the leader of the pack behind her.
Yeah, it's something I've said it in earlier episodes that I sometimes forget how dominant Alyssa Thomas is until you watch Alyssa Thomas and you're like, oh, that's right. That's Alyssa Thomas. Like you sit back and you're like, oh, that's right. I forgot. My bad. Didn't mean to disrespect your game. I apologize. You know what I mean? Like I sat there and I was like, I don't know what AT's doing. And then I was like, oh no, I know what AT's doing. I'm sorry. I did not mean to do that. I apologize. Before we get into that Minnesota Sky game, I want to make sure that you guys know where to find us, which is everywhere on all platforms: Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, we're TikTok. There we go. I think I got them all. Twitter, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky. There we go. TikTok at Courtside KB. Make sure you check out our website, which is free. It is free.com at courtsidewithkarlibell.com, where you can get all types of content there, written content. And I will have some great stuff from the WNBA All-Star game next week. I will be in Indianapolis, so we will have some great things there. And then as well, if you're like, I want to hear Karli talk even more, and you want to know even something, I want to pay to hear Karli talk, which, like, wow, appreciate you. Join that Patreon, which is patreon.com/courtside with Karli Bell. Join that man-to-man tier for exclusive episodes every single Thursday. $6. I mean, Netflix costs more than that. And that's Netflix with ads costs more than that. So, like, just saying, I made it real reasonable for y'all. So make sure you check us out there. So, Sloane, let's get into that Sky Lynx game. What's crazy is, these last couple weeks, I've sat there and I'm like, the Sky are so close. Like, they were so close to getting it together. They've lost games in like the last 2 minutes, last 3 minutes. Some of it, we can get into officiating if you really want to, but like, some of it has been on inconsistent officiating. Some of it has also been on the small mistakes that the Sky have made, not boxing out, turnovers, things like that. But then to see a full cohesive game where there still was a patch of the game where Minnesota was able to kind of come in and chip away into the lead, which is around the third quarter. But for the Sky to really sound it out and beat the number one team in the league was such a huge statement win for Marsh and this team. And what's crazy is after the game, Angel and Ariel Atkins were just chopping it up and they were having a good old time laughing. And when you see that, it's a good thing to see. But from your perspective, from a Minnesota perspective, what was it that Chicago was doing well that made it hard for Minnesota to really get any momentum? Because the runs that, outside of that one large run in the third quarter, the runs were like 6-0, 8-0. Like, they were real small. Like, there wasn't that big momentum that we've seen out of Minnesota, which is like 14-0, 18-2. Like, that wasn't the case throughout much of the game. So what was Chicago doing that was able to really limit Minnesota from your perspective?
I think it's interesting outside of Chicago. I think a lot of people have had to readjust their frame for looking at this team from the one they saw starting the season and allowing 90 plus points in 5 straight games and kind of getting off on the start and they were and the turnovers and thinking, gosh, there's some disarray that's going on here that they're going to have to really work on. But it was early in the season to adjusting to what this team is right now. And I remember coming into that July 6th game at Target Center, the first meeting between these two teams this season, just about a week ago. And head coach Cheryl Reeve agreed with Tyler Marsh, who said, we're playing our best basketball right now as they were coming in. And she said, that's extremely true from what we saw in the preseason, from what we saw early on this season too. And Karli, I think a lot of parallels between that first game and that second game. And that was really the drive and determination of the Chicago Sky to try and knock off this team who feel like, okay, we've kind of gotten this together. Let's show what we can do. And the Lynx have a target on their back where each win against them becomes that signature win at this point in the season for any team basically that plays them. So that's something that Minnesota has to contend with every single night, is teams wanting to knock them off and coming at them incredibly hard. The fact that first game, Karli, came down to a block basically or close to the buzzer, in the final minute. It was a Rachel Banham potential game tying 3 blocked by Alana Smith. It was that close to being a different result back on July 6th. So no surprise to see them come out of the gate as fierce as they did, especially on their home court. It was a great crowd at Wintrust Arena too. So they were really feeding off of that energy and the motivation that they had. And Coach Reeve did not mince words after the game. She said that they competed harder than us. She called out her team's effort at some times too, especially when it came to the second chance points, 28 that Minnesota allowed, 13 offensive rebounds. Camila Cardoso is really turning into a handful. I think she obviously always has been because of her size, but seeing her development right now is really impressive, I think, for how she's been able to harness her game, harness her size, and make an impact. And then obviously, Angel Reese and continuing her streak too, and the ability for her to just rack up points at such a rapid rate. I think a lot of credit needs to go to Tyler Marsh for how he has helped transform her game. Certainly, you know, a high turnover prone player, but she's kind of new to seeing the floor from this spot too. But to have her getting downhill against the Lynx so many times, this is not a secret. The Lynx are very undersized, maybe more so than anybody else, but they have the battlers and the skill to try and combat that. You see Alana Smith and any post player, they are trying to deny any post entry pass possible. That was how Coach Reeve kind of chalked things up there. It's hard to not talk about rebounds being such a factor because Minnesota's undersized, because Minnesota shoots so well. Sometimes those rebounding numbers can be a little bit deceptive, I think. You can't just say Minnesota's a bad or poor rebounding team. You have to look at the circumstances of how they play and what's going on in these games. But that particular game, Reeve said, was basically unacceptable to have those kind of numbers and those extra opportunities and those putbacks right at the rim. So to me, that's something that stands out incredibly much. But Minnesota also wasn't able to get much from its bench in that last game too, having minutes for these starters who again are playing 11 games in 20 days by the time the All-Star break comes around. All around, Chicago was able to just take that one, and credit to them because, you know, Reeve said, they competed right from the get-go, and you could feel that energy and that motivation. And Karli, I remember after that close loss at Target Center, Rachel Bannon, the Minnesota native, said, we know we can beat anyone. And that game was incredibly close and clearly a really prescient thing to say for how they came back and beat Minnesota. But rebounding is a big one that comes out to me where this team really, really was dominant.
What's crazy is there's been conversations around, this has been a theme in the Sky clubhouse, franchise, front office, locker room, whatever you want to call it, is that they like to discuss the difference between playing ball and hooping. And what they said after the game, and Angel said it best, she goes, I was playing on the blacktop. That's what it felt like, you know, in that first quarter. You felt that, like, just, we're here to hoop in the alleyway. Ooh, like that's what it felt like in that first quarter. And that what's crazy is watching the Sky at the beginning of the season and just seeing, I mean, honestly, it was some of the worst basketball to open up the season. It was really bad. Like there's no, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was some of the worst basketball I've seen in a long time to open up the season because they just looked so chaotic. They looked like they were forcing things. They looked just really, they were really trying to buy into the system and they weren't adjusting to the system as quickly as they wanted to. And that led to so many mental mistakes. A lot of their mistakes were things that they created out of rushing and forcing things to happen, whether that be offensively or defensively. Now you're not seeing that. Now it's like the turnovers have always been a problem for Chicago. I don't know how they can clean it up. It's you know, the fact that this guy were able to pull that out with 19 turnovers is really incredible because anytime they've given up more than 14 turnovers, they've lost. So, which is a good thing to see. But I do want to ask you about Angel Reese because I've obviously been the one watching her every single game. And I knew the moment she came into the league that she was going to be this generational talent. I knew how it was going to translate over. I knew it was going to take a little bit, just how it does with any player to come into the league. It takes a little bit to adjust to the physicality, the speed, how the game is played. There's a little bit different rules between college and all that jazz. But what Angel's been able to do specifically this season has really been remarkable because she's re-tapping into that wing / guard bag that she had in AAU and in high school. You're seeing that facilitation, like her assist numbers are, I believe, almost quadruple what they were last year. Like she's averaging 5 to 7 assists a game in the last 8 games. Like she's doing a lot of things, taking on this point forward position. What have you seen out of her from what you've seen her play against Minnesota? And then just looking at her numbers, what can Angel Reese be, not just for the Sky, but for the W?
You know, it's interesting with Angel Reese because that is a big transition to go from a primary back to the basket. You just get the rebounds, force them back up and in kind of player for years of her career. And then Marsha's saying, this is going to be better for our offense. This is what's going to be most productive for us is spreading things out. You have Cardoso inside and let's have you go to work one-on-one because Reese does have that quick step against a lot lot of players at her position, and then she turns into a freight train real quick on her way to the rim as she just kind of barrels down and tries to get herself, some easy looks or a trip to the free throw line too. So to see her transformation to now someone working around the perimeter, I don't know if I saw that coming, and it was interesting to see in the preseason and how she's adapted to that role, how she embraced it under a brand new head coach, because maybe you wonder, is this going to affect her numbers, her rebounding numbers? How good of a distributor and facilitator can she be? But especially those post-to-post plays, I think have been really impressive. I think, Karli, the biggest thing she had to work on was her efficiency. And we're starting to see that click in the last, like you said, maybe 6 to 8 games, because shooting 43% around the rim is not going to cut it. I mean, that's a really tough statistic to have, especially when she shoots so much around the rim. She's second, I believe, to Dearica Hamby in attempts around 5 feet. She's been able to increase her field goal percentage to, I believe I have in my notes, 50% over that last recent stretch of play. And that's going to be really helpful for her overall. I mean, that was my question about her coming in, is can she shoot away from the basket? So she was struggling inside. There's no secret about that. You look at her rookie year and this year too, although it's continuing to climb up, and especially playing on the perimeter. Is she going to be able to look for her own shot? Can she knock down the 12-footer? And she's doing that a little bit more and more too. So I think that's the next thing for her to unlock, is trying to find that touch and finesse with her shot. Can she do that to be the most well-rounded player she can? You might think, well, she's putting up ridiculous numbers. Things are working for her anyway. I'm sure that she's also trying to improve and expand her game in different ways as well to make this team better and to be a contender in the years to come too. So that's something that sticks out to me with her, is obviously her tenacity, her relentlessness, her drive. I called games of her at Maryland for sure early on in her college career. So I feel like I've been watching her for a big chunk of time here. But I think if she's able to increase her efficiency, particularly around the rim, can she take her game outside, become a face-up player? That's going to be completely new and just crazy territory for someone with her kind of athleticism and drive.
And the only way that you can get that efficiency number up is if you have the confidence to take those shots. Like, you just have to continue to shoot. I was talking to Ann Crosby earlier this week about Allie Quigley, and just, what an amazing retirement ceremony that the Sky had for Allie Quigley. It was well done. The whole crowd yelled out "salute" when she got out there. It was just super, and an Allie chant. It was awesome. It was just a really cool moment. But I was talking to Ann about Allie, and I feel like this can apply to Angel, is James Wade, when he was the head coach of the Sky, when Allie was going through a shooting slump, he would just continue to draw things up for her. And he goes, eventually the shot's going to go through. And I feel like that's what the case is going to be for Angel. She just needs to continue to take those shots, because the more that you take them, the more that you can feel confident in them, and then they will eventually start to fall. And this sounds, you may not agree with this, but I think of anything to fix in your game, shooting's kind of the easiest one to fix. Like, of anything, because defense is something that's all footwork, that's hands, and you have to change defensive schemes and everything up depending on who you're guarding. Rebounding is something that's always going to be difficult because you have to have bodies. Shooting is you just got to go shoot. Like, that's all it is. Get your hands in motion, get things moving. And I'm excited to see what she can do. So, day that we put this out, we get another rematch. Sky played the Lynx 3 times in 6 days. And before we get into that, I want to ask you about this with the scheduling situation, because this has been something that's been a theme throughout the entire league, is how jam-packed some of these schedules are, because there is the beauty of last year is that there was that Olympic break, so the teams got like 2 to 3 weeks rest. That's not the case this year. 44 games in the same amount of time, and some teams have played 10 games in 14 days. You've seen some Lynx 11 and 21 days. The Sky had a little bit where they're playing 6 and 10 days. Like, what's your thoughts on how the league can fix the scheduling problem, and how impactful do you think it is? Because some people are saying there's shooting slumps, and that there's a decline in higher scoring games because just the girls be tired. They're just exhausted. So, how can the league fix this if they're going to continue to expand, but they're not going to expand the actual time of the season? We don't know. That could change. But, what is there something that a coach can do in prepping, or is it just the league needs to adjust and fix this so that you're not having this amount of games in this many days.
I think this is another reason why the W is at an inflection point right now. And I'm feel pretty confident saying that this is going to be a big topic of discussions in CBA negotiations too. Of course, I should point out that Minnesota Lynx players they will not be anything but professional in talking about the way this schedule has been, where it's just like, this is what's in front of us. We're going to take it game by game. Every team has stretches like this, and we just have to get through it. This is what it is in playing the WNBA. And certainly chartering has immensely helped these kinds of turnarounds, and the toll on their bodies, the resources that they have access to now compared to 5-10 years in the past. But when we're looking at a 44-game schedule, expanded playoffs, those first 2 rounds used to be one and done basically, and now they're 3-game series. So that is significant too, and adding more mileage, adding more time, to their bodies and to the schedule. So I can see this being certainly a point of contention when it comes to when they decide to sit down. The league is going to want, of course, as many games as possible. That's going to mean more people in the stands. That's going to mean more viewership opportunities and more numbers when it comes to advertising and how that's all propped up and supported. I will say that Coach Reeve, before the game against the Sky, their second game on Saturday, said, this is the most illogical schedule I've seen in my 25 years in the league. And that was the first time really anyone with the Lynx has kind of broken out of that a little bit, because Minnesota had 2 back-to-backs within a week span. 2 of those were on the road, Phoenix and Los Angeles, and basically playing every other day. I know the Commissioner's Cup is also added into this equation as well too, and they earned themselves into that, but it still would have been incredibly jam-packed at this point. We're talking about a 3-week stretch of basically playing every other day, which is where the Minnesota Lynx are right now to close out the All-Star break. So I think that is an opportunity for the players and the other negotiating side to maybe come to heads when it comes to, what this is going to look like for the league going forward when there are, these competing interests. And, maybe there's some players who like the direction and expanding things out, but want to find a little more breathing room when it comes to looking at the WNBA schedule. So I think that that's going to be absolutely something that comes up with these negotiations. So players have more access to those recovery tools. Chartering helps, but it's tough to get your head around a stretch like this, certainly.
Yeah, and I've always been a proponent of moving the basketball season into the fall, but I don't know if that's me, because then you're also allowing, if you're going to still have the draft in April, you're then actually allowing the rookies to rest, and you're not letting them get injured. There's other things playing into that, but
that's a time-honored tradition of just going all the way out nonstop.
There's nothing that bothers me more than the word tradition sometimes, man. Good Lord, doesn't have to be that way. There's some
that's true.
Change it. We can change it. All right. Sky Lynx, third time in they played each other 3 times in the last, it'll be, 5 or 6 games at this point. I mean, it's kind of one of those things where when you play a team so close in in somewhat of a back-to-back, they have Sunday off, obviously, and then, playing on Monday. Do you think we're going to see anything different out of both teams? For me, I think the Sky are going to just want to again come out with that same effort and energy and not make as many mistakes in the turnover department. I think that's the biggest thing that the Sky need to do. And then, just got to have Ariel Atkins and you just have higher shooting efficiency from everybody, but it was still a good shooting game for the Sky. But I mean, what are you anticipating from this matchup on Monday?
Yeah. Okay. Funny enough, they're going to meet 4 times within a 17-day span because they'll meet again after the All-Star break.
That's
so another quirky thing. Yeah. But looking at game number 3 between these 2 teams, Karli, I think a lot is going to be different. They are not going to score 57 points in a half. That was a season high for a Lynx opponent this year. The previous had been 52 to Golden State and to the LA Sparks back on June 14th. So that's going to be different. They are not going to shoot 60% from 2-point range in this game again. That was an astronomical number for a team that had entered that game, shot over 50% just 2 times in the entire season. Now, that was that Dallas game right before, so they're building some, momentum with their efficiency, I think, but I don't think that's going to happen again. When you look at Cheryl Reeve coach teams, the way that they bounce back is pretty remarkable. The adjustments that she's going to be able to make, especially, Minnesota being an undersized team. I thought even those lineups with Elizabeth Williams and Cardoso on the floor, that was also really tough to handle too from a defense perspective. So I think you're looking at one of the greatest coaches ever when it comes to making those adjustments and trying to reverse the previous result if you weren't happy with it. And I'll be interested to see, especially when it comes to rebounding, because Reese said this is an effort thing. That's the way she describes rebounding. So maybe it's kind of putting that mantle on the players to make sure things are different. But I think there's going to certainly be schematic changes too. I also think too, Ariel Atkins was magnificent in that game. But Karli, I thought a lot of her shots were very well contested. She was just having a great night. I mean, the mid-range, we love the mid-range. That's another thing I will be an unabashed supporter of. I get to watch Courtney Williams every single night, which is very fun too. But there were some where I thought, you just got to give her credit. I mean, that was, I thought, really well defended. And that was a lot of her shots. So I'd be interested if she was able to kind of have that kind of night again too. So those are the biggest adjustments I'm thinking about, is how they're going to guard, post to post when there's a different combinations. Is there ever a combination where it's not Reese, Cardoso, or Williams on the floor? Is there ever a time where it's just one of them?
No.
I'd have to look at it doesn't feel that way. I'd have to look at what that lineup data is, but it feels like it's rare. Having to deal with that, I think, is going to be the biggest adjustment, but also just the way we've challenged her players when it comes to the rebounding. 28 second chance points cannot happen again. It cannot come close to that again, I'm sure, is the message to this team too. But I think Chicago might have a tougher climb when it comes to their efficiency, particularly when you look at, really all across the floor, but especially in that 2-point range.
No, honestly, I sat there and I was like, man, they're just hot hands today. Like, because I've seen them shoot, 35 to 42% all season. And as you said, if there's a team that knows how to bounce back, Courtney Williams also made it very well known on the Chicago Sky Instagram saying that they will come and run it back again on Monday, which, God, Courtney Williams, love that woman more than life itself. Just one of the funniest individuals on the planet. Also love to watch her hoop. Stud buds, hilarious. Yeah. Love it. One of the best things. Love it. Sloane, thank you so much for joining me this week. Where can the people find you? What you got in store outside of listening to your lovely voice for every Minnesota Lynx game?
Thank you very much. And I should point out, I travel to every single game. You could catch it on the Lynx app if you are curious. Maybe there's some Lynx fans out there watching this too. But you can check out the Lynx app, the iHeartRadio app every single time I travel with the team. I'm kind of migrating to Instagram. So that's _Sloane Martin, Sloane with an E. I'm also on X at Sloane Martin. Again, Sloane with an E. Don't forget that. But that's what I've got going on right now is Lynx basketball. I do a lot of college and that part of the season too, but we're all W right now.
Yeah, no, she does travel. I've seen her at every time at Wintrust. She is. I feel like you're basically part of the team at this point with how much.
A lot of people confuse me. They're like, "Oh, are you a player too?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's kind of you, but a little past my prime."
I think you could probably get out there and throw a little bows for like couple minutes,
Well, if they need someone like to deliver some fouls, boy, I got them handled there. Yeah.
Love to hear it. Thank you, Sloane, so much for joining me this week. Again, make sure you follow us on all platforms at Courtside KB. If you're watching us on YouTube, please comment, like, subscribe to our YouTube channel, patreon.com/Courtside with Karli Bell for all the exclusive content. Check out our website, courtsidewithkarlibell.com. Wow, I got that out fast. And you will catch me next time on the sideline.